Yeah, give it just a second. Yeah, all right, we're good.
Okay. So before we started on air, I thought it might be a good idea to address the difference or non-difference in in-game lore and out-of-game lore or texts, and why the distinction doesn't matter. And I find myself saying almost every day, I say to somebody else, the games are a lens with which to view the lore. They are not the source of the lore itself. And a lot of that, I think, stems from the fact that the Elder Scrolls universe started as a tabletop game, which, in my opinion, is closer to literature than to a video game. So, I mean, if we're going to spread out over all these different media to tell all these stories, then why would we limit ourselves to only one medium, being video games? Just because it's in the video game doesn't necessarily mean it is the be all end all truth. It's not the Silmarillion of TES. We don't have that. Instead, we have to make our own assumptions on the things that aren't already given. Like, hey, wood elves exist. Vardenfell is a place. Like, yeah, we know that. That's that part's objective. But everything past those facts, what happened, why, who did it, those things are subjective, and that's where a lot of the confusion comes from, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. And on top of that, a lot of people who do come into the lore very enthusiastically will read the books in the game and take it with the full grain of salt that it is literally what it's saying rather than it should be interpreted differently.
And
So I'm gonna
that I would knock
go
us
ahead.
to the Selectives Lorecast, and because they did a phenomenal job on their unreliable narrator cast, which I think was the very first one,
Yeah, it was.
and that does a very good job of kind of describing what we were just talking about with the sources being questionable, because you always do have to take everything with a full grain of salt, even if it is a first person account. There's no objectivity to it. It's all subject to the writer's predispositions, just as you would find in real life.
Mhm.
I'm going to play the devil's advocate here. Coming into the law community as late as I did, I get the argument. I mean, the repetitive argument that we all hear all the time. The law is too much. It's too big. It's too deep, and it's also very much out there. If you don't have a finger in um, the mythic, if you don't have a finger in history, if you don't have another finger in philosophy, it becomes quite quite a bit to actually um, get on with. To think of yourself like you know what you are talking about. So people tend to oversimplify things. They tend to go on tangents where they allow themselves to think that this is just a game. Here's how it is. This is the producing company. This is what they're saying. That's canon. This is not canon. And that's what causes the shitstorm that we have been getting for quite a bit now. Or at least that's what I think.
I definitely think there is a bit of an issue with that, because you do have to have your fingers in all those pies. You have to have some kind of knowledge of real world history. You have to have some kind of knowledge of real world metaphysics, even, which is a hugely understudied realm. It's like the life imitates art sometimes. It's the way that we have to look at it. Not art imitates life, but life imitates art. Because it's just like, to really grasp Elder Scrolls anything, you have to kind of let go of any absolutes, because there really are not that many
No absolutes.
that you can use as guide stones. Um, So it's difficult, I guess, to really rectify the issues without just spending the time.
Yeah, I mean, it does take a certain degree of, I mean, and I feel like we can clump a lot of that together in saying that, I mean, a lot of it's education, honestly. You need, but like with these fingers, like I've taken philosophy classes in college. I've taken, history classes and literature classes. So, I mean, just by the fact that I've taken these classes in a college environment and have analyzed these kinds of things, I think gives me in particular an edge on analyzing the lore, because I can use those things that I've been taught, and apply that to lore. I can generalize that skill.
Exactly.
And so, I mean, for someone who hasn't had those experiences, someone who hasn't gone to college, or someone who maybe hasn't done as well in school. I mean, not that I'm saying there's anything wrong with following a different path.
It's not. Pardon me. It's not
But
about what kind of education you get. It's more about what you know, what you've read,
Yeah,
what you've
because
educated yourself in.
because
sure.
because I mean, Andrew, I have to caveat that, like, I mean, you obviously respect me intellectually, especially as a scientist and physicist, and I don't have anything past a high school diploma, and I was in special ed in high school.
But see, that actually helps illustrate my point, because you have been educated in such a way that you are a physicist, an astrophysicist, right? You're an astrophysicist. Is that correct?
I do both. I do both
Okay.
classical
Okay.
physics and astrophysics.
Now, because you've been educated in that particular strain of intellectual pursuit, your lore tends to follow that path.
Oh yeah,
You
oh
have the
yeah.
Matryoshka brain, the Talos operating system, all these things that you talk about, which are great, and I love those ideas. Whereas I tend to look at things from like a Shakespearean perspective,
Oh yeah, oh
or
yeah.
a Victorian literature, or I might look at it from a dramatic perspective. I've done drama before. I might
Yes,
look at
but
things. Go ahead.
one thing does not exclude the other. It could follow. I mean, I come from a mathematical background. I highly enjoyed the Cephes theme for a while, but then I educated myself in other things. I educated myself in mythology, so I could see the parallels between the gods of the Elder Scrolls and the gods of the real world. Uh, Sometimes I overreach, yes, but it you need that sort of knowledge in order to comprehend
Oh yes.
or give logic to any of this.
Yes, yes, and it goes back to typical reading comprehension. I guess what, like Andrew was saying, that it comes to, you can read a book and take it literally. Like, a lot of people read a lot of books today. No offense, Michael, but like the Bible or other religious texts, and take it quite literally, when we're all trained as people who've loved the lore for a long time and know that there's varying attacks and contrasts and juxtapositions from a lot of texts, and like Evan had mentioned, the unreliable narrator, that there's the group of people who take it as literally, and and I think those are the people that a lot of us call sky babies. And then there's the people who literally know what's going on, and to try to to digest as much information as they can from all different perspectives. I think a good case in point of this is the two texts that in the beginning of the Morrowind main quests that uh, um, Cassius recommends for you to read. One's on Morrowind, and it's a very imperial text, and I forgot what the other text was, and it's very much of a contrasting Dunmer point of view.
Yeah, I mean, it all really does loop back to what I was saying, where it's like you can't really in first person narrations of like a they on hand witness this event, because it all boils down to, well, was that person an imperial scribe or were they an Altmer mage? That's important to consider when you're reading anything, because it will color the picture of the script that you're reading.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
But see, and that idea in and of itself is a concept that a lot of people struggle with, and I mean, part of that might be, I mean, I'm going to keep harping on education, and while I'm not saying that that's the be all end all of of the lore, you need to be highly educated to be into lore. It's not what I'm suggesting at all, but I am suggesting that it's going to stack the deck in your favor if you understand, at least from a literary perspective, a lot of these sort of concepts like unreliable narrator. I mean, because we see a lot of that in a lot of classic literature. Looking at like Beowulf or Gilgamesh to a point. We see a lot of a lot of room for unreliable narrator, and so we have to have these conversations in a scholarly environment. When we analyze these texts, and so without the knowledge of someone can be biased when they write a thing. Someone may have their facts wrong. They may be lying. I mean, a lot of people don't really think about that. They read a text. This is what the text says. This is objective. That's it. We're done. And I mean, we all know. All of us here know that that's not really the case.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I completely agree with that. But the one thing that bouncing back on is the higher education thing. While I agree that it goes in favor, but it's not primordial. It's not either you have a college degree or you can't understand TS law.
Yeah.
As
No,
you
I'm not.
said.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a
Yeah, as you said.
Boolean thing at all. So
I know. As you said. I'm not saying you did. I'm saying, as you said, one of the things that, to understand a theme, a subject, you need to have the tools to do so. And it's just a bloody headache when you see all these people taking turns in screeching and screaming all the time that canon this, canon that. It really takes away from the fun of it all. If they just gave themselves, a moment of respite to just appreciate the lore, to just in what might be lacking, then it would change the entire equation.
yeah, I agree, and I mean, I think part of that comes from this idea that the games are the source of the lore, and I mean, I think there needs to be a push away from the games being that prerequisite for what makes real lore. I think the prerequisite should be, how good is this lore? How well does it fit in with the other things that we know? There are a lot of ideas that we see that are just dope. They're cool ideas, and because they're cool ideas and they fit with other things, just because those two facts fit into that whatever nugget of lore that is, they become widely accepted. But then someone might show up new to the group. Oh, well, that's not in the game. Why are you saying that? And that's a huge division.
I want to jump in here and throw in a monkey wrench to what we're saying.
A Maruk wrench?
A monkey, yeah, Maruk wrench, exactly. So part of the war on canon that you see now is something that happened in the Star Wars community. Now, I've been with Star Wars from like the beginning. Okay, like I saw it for the first time, I want to say in 1980. So I'm an old Star Wars fan.
Michael, you're taking the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say the same.
So what happened was with Star Wars, you had the 3 movies, and then in 1990, George Lucas handpicked Timothy Zahn. Don't talk to Kirkbride about this. Handpicked Timothy Zahn to continue the stories, and what you ended up with was a series of novels, started by Zahn, and then other people jumped in on them, and all these crazy stories about what happens to Luke and everyone else. There was a cartoon series called Droids. There was an Ewok cartoon series too, I think.
Yeah.
Comic books, all kinds of stuff. And what ended up happening is that the stories that everyone was telling did not mesh. And it was a mess. And so around about a little bit before they announced the prequels, people tried to systematize the Star Wars universe, and they couldn't do it because everything was such a mess. And so what developed was a concept of what is canon in Star Wars. And it exists to this day that the movies are canon, then the novelizations, then everything else. And so what you saw in the development of the Elder Scrolls is it started in a very kind of subjective canon kind of thing because it came out of RPG groups and stuff like that. But you started to have these out-of-game writings by Kirkbride and other developers, some of which got really, really weird. And people tried to systematize it, and it was really difficult. And so that's where I think the idea of what's in the games is canon, and now we do have Elder Scrolls novels. What's in the Elder Scrolls novels or in-game books is canon, and then everything else is whatever. So I think that's where it's kind of a natural reaction that people have when you get like you see a pluralistic turn in a series, that they want to say, okay, no, this is the thing. And whether or not we as kind of lore beards have done a great job of educating people about why Imperials flying giant moths into outer space is awesome, because it is. Yeah, maybe we need to explain that stuff a little bit better.
I would like to interject here on that. The example of Star Wars does not really apply here, even though it's a good example, because Star Wars started as a franchise. It's the mind child of someone, a person, George Lucas in this case. But the Elder Scrolls is a jumble of ideas. It's not the mind child of one person. It started as a tabletop game. It's been a collective effort since the beginning. The books in Daggerfall and in Arena are written by fans, by people that play the game. It only took an official turn in Morrowind when the team decided to introduce the unreliable narrator principle and just put some order into things. That's why I think it's different from the Star Wars canon.
I mean, no, I get that, and that originally it was all George Lucas, but even as early as 1980, Richard Dean Foster wrote Splinter in the Mind's Eye, and so it expanded beyond Lucas almost, but not quite, immediately. Still, I understand what you're saying, though.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we want to keep going on this train of thought, or do we want to start delving into some Skyrim lore?
Well, you know I'm all about Skyrim lore.
And I'm having trouble with my mic. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Thanks.
I guess the first thing that we should talk about if we're going to start tackling Skyrim is what is the main theme of the Elder Scrolls games, and how the story is connected from Morrowind to Oblivion, to Skyrim. And I mean, Daggerfall, I think, does actually follow the same arc too, because of
The prisoner of the tower unleashed by the dragon.
yeah. So I think the best way to tackle this bit is to talk about the main theme being like the fall of the towers, and how the world that we're playing in is slowly deteriorating, sometimes even at the hand of the main characters that we play as.
And actually, I think that's a very valid point. I'm sorry, I'm hearing an echo in my headphones, so if I stutter, that's why. But I think Evan puts a very good point on all of that. That even as the main protagonist, that you work for disabling the towers.
And there is a little bit of misconception. I feel like that is a strictly Thalmor kind of plot. And the reality is, Lorcan is pulling all the strings on picking apart his own, physical creation. Which is why we see, the Nerevarine going to Red Mountain to send the Heart of Lorcan back home, which ends up collapsing Red Tower. And, an apparition of Tiber Septim comes to us and is like, we talked about this last time. Tiber Septim comes to us, or an apparition thereof, and is very clearly egging us on to, kind of start going out with the old, in with the new.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, maybe someone should elaborate on the concept of the prisoner of the tower.
So the idea of the prisoner, without getting into all of the massive backgrounds that I would need to cover that fully, I would cut it short at saying the prisoner is the only one with free will in the Elder Scrolls setting. And we always play as a prisoner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a great concept. That
Yes,
we're
but
always
how
trapped
much of a free will?
to be the hero eventually.
How much of a free will you have if you have a set destiny? In each game, you have a role to play. That's not much of a free will.
So you have a role to play, but at the same time, it is yours to do with what you will. I mean, I'll take it meta and just look at the gameplay. In Skyrim, I have about 17 or so save files, only 2 of which have actually done the main quests. That is an example of the prisoner's free will. You are free to just run around and be murder hobo supreme.
Well, yeah, I agree there, but within the main quest of the game, you don't really have that much of a free will in going through with it or not.
Because you're always talking as someone else. You look at the champion of Cyrodiil. They are walking.
I know, but for example, one thing that was discontinued after Daggerfall, which makes me wonder why. but from a development point of view, I can see why. And the open end of Daggerfall, which was later incorporated into the lore, all 7 endings of it, you had choice. You had a different choice in each playthrough. You would go with Orsinium, or you'd go with Daggerfall, or you'd go with. It depended on who you gave Numidium to, the end days. While with the
Well,
other games, the end is always the same.
the Warp of the West is a whole other can of worms.
So I
I
think if
mean,
you look
when you
at
look at
their
the Warp of the West,
good RPGs versus not as good RPGs, honestly. In Morrowind, you have the choice to kill or not kill Vivek. That's the big one there. As for the Heart of Lorcan, in Red Mountain, you don't really have a choice there because, on a basic need for life, survival is what takes precedence, right? And it's kind of hard to survive when you've got a mad demigod throwing out this horrendous disease that could potentially kill off or enslave everything to his will, right? So it's a little bit wonky there because it's like, okay, if I want to continue living, then I have to do this. So that's a matter of that choice not really existing, but that has nothing to do with the free will that we're talking about with the prisoner.
Evan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were thinking of free will in a much more metaphysical, meta sense, as like meta referred to in the games. Because like in a game, I mean, you have free will in a sense. Like I'm playing ESO as we're talking, and I'm just running around trying to find ancestor silk and stuff like that. Whereas somebody else is like, oh, I got missions to do and whatnot. That's not the free will we're talking about. The free will we're talking about is the ability to transcend the cycle of, well, I mean, we could probably argue about this, but the cycle of violence and birth, death, rebirth, etc. That makes up the Arbus. Does that sound about right to you?
Yes.
Oh yes.
Yeah. No, I'm not talking like, we do anything. That's just like a game aspect at that point. What I'm talking about is like heavy duty. I can, forge my own destiny from whatever the hell scraps of reality I want to. And there are a lot of times, however, when we see our characters walking just so. But that has to do with the myth echoes that we're trying to recreate to get ourselves out of the cage. That's not the free will that we're talking about with the prisoner.
I see. I get the difference now.
What do we mean? And anybody, please jump in. What do we mean when we say we're speaking on kind of this meta level? What do we mean by the prisoner? What prisoner of what? How are they imprisoned, etc., etc.?
Well, I mean, Michael, I'm always going to go back to that's a computer program, and the prisoner might represent that in the game, and that you spent money to buy the game, and that you're the prisoner for, slogging how many hours you're going to slog into it.
Right. So that's definitely a fourth wall kind of way of looking at it. That you the player are actually a prisoner of the game. But I think that within the lore of Tamriel itself, that in the in-game universe, there's a concept of prisoner, and maybe we need to look at that for a little bit.
Okay, maybe in an in-game sense, look at it as A lot of the other schools have tutorials. I mean, obviously, Morrowind was probably the shortest, and Oblivion was probably the longest in-game tutorial at the beginning. In that sense, that you're still in jail, you're still a prisoner, and you're learning the ropes of the game to eventually earn your freedom. What you do, it's a good analogy of that is once you leave the Imperial sewers in Oblivion. But I'm sure that's
Okay.
not what Michael was touching upon. So, Michael,
Yeah.
you go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I had a different idea. So if maybe, I don't know, maybe this is all like really basic stuff, and if it is, I apologize. But it just seemed to me like it would be something that could be kind of useful, especially based on Jaster's question. So the idea, this kind of goes back to all the crazy stuff with the metaphysics, that the Arbus is the dream of Anu, and that Anu is a prisoner of his choices, and his choices are very, very bad. What we know about Anu is that, he tried to create the 12 worlds of creation with his love Nur, and depending on how you interpret this myth, that he murdered her, and that he couldn't cope with the fact that he murdered her, so he created a kind of alternative personality called Padme, which in Jungian terms would be his shadow self, and says that it's Padme that killed her, not Anu himself. Okay, so Anu can't deal with all this, so he goes and sleeps in the sun. This is all in the in-game book, Children's Inuit. He dreams the Elder Scrolls universe, and his narrative, his kind of his meta narratives and his psyche, all of that stuff becomes the dream. You are the dreamer, but you also become the dream. And so all of his narratives flow into the Elder Scrolls dream, and that's why you see all these different dichotomies, like Anu and Sithis, Akatosh and Lorkhan, all the way down to like in the Skyrim main quest between what's the Imperial General, Tullius and Ulfric.
Yeah.
And so you have all these these dichotomies, and so all of that flows into the dream. You are a prisoner of Anu's narratives. You can't escape from the way that he of the universe that he's dreamed, the way he's created it. But the prisoner has been taken out of the kind of standard the narratives of the universe. So, and this kind of you can, like, I did some studies on correctional ethics, and people who are put into prison really are taken out of society, and they're really divorced from kind of all of the narratives that make up who we are as a culture, and they kind of end up developing a prison culture, if you will. So prisoners are removed from all that, and in being removed from it, they're able to see it from the outside, and that means that they can change it. Now, am I crazy? Have you guys ever heard this stuff before, or am I completely nuts?
You know, in the guise of Elder Scrolls, that is the first that I've heard it, but that is an incredibly succinct way of describing what we're trying to get at here.
That is definitely the one best of all ways of putting it.
Cool, man. I really thought we'd all talked about this before. My bad.
Oh, yeah, Michael, we've talked about this before plenty of times, brother.
Now, I haven't heard the actual prisoner approach, like correctional system prisoner versus society approach. It's the first time I've heard it.
Yeah, now granted, some of that comes from, the class that I took on correctional ethics, and that's a whole other story, but I'm trying to think where it was that I first heard that. It was, of course, I want to say that it was Kirkbride, but I could be wrong. It could, hell, I could have made it up myself. Who knows?
Okay, and this might not be accessible for some of you because of modding and whether you want to mush up your game or muck up your game by modding, but you don't necessarily have to be the prisoner. And there's a lot of alternative start mod.
Love that.
You know,
you're not necessarily the
think
prisoner.
regardless
I
of
mean,
where we start, we're always a prisoner of some sort. You know, it's like it's not like we are physically a prisoner in jail. That's just a very on the nose homage to the meta aspect that we're getting at.
Definitely.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So you know, whether you what's up?
What do you guys make of the fact that in every game you're a prisoner, and in every game a dragon sets you free with a task?
I mean, that's just another shout back to Lorcan and Akatosh, as always, because those are the big wigs pulling all the strings that make up the physical universe.
And one of
what does it tell you of the inner workings of the mind of the god that has dreamt all that? I mean,
oh, I can answer that, or I can give an answer which may be rubbish. So take it with a grain of salt. So one of the things Carl Jung says is that the psyche seeks to achieve equilibrium. That the conscious mind, when it's been subjected to some kind of trauma, will work to cope with it, and that's where we get coping skills and things like that. But sometimes the conscious mind can't deal with it, and so it will shunt it down into, I want to say it's the subconscious, and that's when you start to have dreams about it, usually nightmares, stuff like that. And if your subconscious can't process the trauma, then it'll start to come out through unconscious actions, which could be like a nervous tick. There's different things like that. This is not to say that everyone that has a nervous tick has suffered trauma, but this is just an example.
Yep.
Anu's psyche, Anu from the top level of the dream, wants to have his psyche wants to achieve equilibrium consciously. So now as he dreams, his subconscious is attempting to achieve equilibrium and peace with itself. And that means that these two disparate parts of himself in the dream, Anu and Sithis, are trying to find a way to reconcile. And you see this through the relationship, not so much of Anu and Sithis, but on the level of Akatosh and Lorcan. And going all the way forward into Coda, which there's a lot we could say about Coda, but there's this whole thing where at the very end of Coda, you have the priest who is not a priest, Lorcan, and his heart is Akatosh. So that Akatosh, who is on some level responsible for the tearing out of the heart of Lorcan, becomes the heart of Lorcan, and that is a representation of the equilibrium being established.
Oh yeah. Well, and also the whole Lorca Aka thing. I mean, as me and Michael have gone through this on great. Me and Michael and Todd have gone through this on great length. That Lorca Aka are the same being. I mean, it's space time.
Chris Franzen brought something up when we were talking. We're going to sound a little bit unrelated, and it's like, of course we're talking about Lig, Evan. Shut the fuck up. But we were talking about Lig the other day, and via the Leaper Demon King and Dagon. And Chris brought up another trifecta because things always come in threes. You've got Lorcan, the divine sword, that can create something from nothing, that is like the essence of taking all of reality, all of possibility, and making it reality. Including it here. But basically you've got Akatosh, who is possibility, Lorcan, who is reality, and Dagon, who is the return from reality back to possibility.
Okay.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm gonna have to look into that more because I'm not too familiar with Maceron's lore. I don't spend too much time with the Daedric princesses or princesses, I guess, because they're not assigned sexes. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, the thing is, Dagon is not Mehrunes Dagon. We need to clear that up right now, because Mehrunes the Razor changed Dagon in such a way that Tamriel was able to view him. Because you're talking about a high level of force that goes beyond the Edada when it comes to that.
Mm.
So we are not talking about the Daedric Prince of Destruction, Mehrunes Dagon, because that's just another aspect of the Dreamer that he kind of usurped from elsewhere.
I can
So
speak
almost like
behind
a
that
clone.
because in real life metaphysics, when you look at certain gods, the way they change and adapt from one region to another, and sometimes within the same culture, you can see that they get specifics, that they get specifics injected into them by the people that are worshipping them as they need. For example, what I was discussing earlier with Jonathan about Baal, Moloch of Tyr, how he became two gods in Carthage. He became Ishmun, protector of Carthage, and Baal Hamun, the god of destruction and war and supremacy. So you get one god who is molten and recast into two.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, and honestly, with the Aka Lorcan relationship, I almost view it as split personalities, but others have other ideas, and I would love to hear those.
I mean, this goes back to what we were talking about in the last chat with the shape of the orbis, and it's how it got that way, basically. And it all stems from subgradients, because we've got Anu and Padme, like Michael was talking about, the split egos of the Dreamer. And from Anu, we get Anuiel, which is the agent of I Am. And then from Padme, we get Sithis, which is the agent of I Am Not. In other words, Anuiel is time and Sithis is space. Together they are space-time. On down from that, we get Akatosh and Lorcan. Akatosh is the agent of time, the one that makes it happen. Lorcan is the agent of space, the one that makes something within so that you can perceive it. So it's like a split function of each other. So Akatosh and Lorcan are brothers in a sense. They are one and the same in another sense.
Mm-hmm. Two sides of the same coin, like how Einstein put it with matter and energy. That's how I always describe it. One. Honestly, this sort of topic is something that me, Michael, and Todd at length so many times, as you can account for, Michael.
Yes.
So yeah, brothers, a serpent or a dragon with two heads, however you want to look at it. I mean, they're one and the same. And honestly, I do wish Todd was here because he has a really elegant way of describing how it works with Oriel too.
Yeah, that we did get a request to talk about some Marukati selective stuff, albeit in a roundabout way because she wanted to talk about Alessia, but this is another in-universe subjectivity thing with the Marukati selective splitting away the mannish and murish aspects of the dragon that is time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember that night where Todd did explain that to me, and my mind just pretty much exploded. Watching the ending of Oblivion with what he said in the back of my mind, it's just wow.
Funny, I was just talking about that
know.
earlier in the group.
It's just I mean, and I don't want to quote his basic theorem here, but I'm pretty familiar with it. That when Martin broke the Amulet of Kings, he was time to when the Marikati selectives were dancing upon the tower, White Gold Tower, and they danced them in. They danced them in as a human aspect or a mannish aspect of Oreo, hence making Akatosh.
I mean, do we want to talk about the selective and the way that they broke reality, or do we want to save that for a later date? I'm going to leave that up.
Maybe we should save that for a later date because that's a very deep topic on its own. I mean, what the selective did.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on there. I mean, one of the things that does come up for me though is why would they want to remove the elvish aspects of Akatosh? What was it that drove that? But even attempting to answer that might drag us further in, and we may not want to do that, or we'll be here forever.
Yeah, that was way further into
the short
Mary aspirations and such.
Go ahead, Evan.
The short answer that I would give for that is racism, plain and simple, because the men of early Cyrodiil were kept as slaves for years by the Aelid Empire. So there's a whole history of war surrounding that, actually, and we were talking about this a little bit before the cast started, how it's really convoluted and wonky and weird because Maruk wasn't even alive for those times, and yet he has such strong feelings about them. And the way that all the lore surrounding those subjects is written is something that I really need to get further into because MK, when he was writing it, put this very interesting biblical spin on the way that he was writing.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating to me that the kind of the head Marikati guy, the guy who really kind of defined their ideology and the ascendancy of man over against Mur, was an Imga.
I know, yeah, right?
And so there's
idolize
there's like something. There's more going on here than maybe we've really. We should probably save this for another time, but I kind of feel like maybe there's some really good stuff that we have to unpack.
Yeah,
Maruk is just awesome.
Maruk is awesome, and also that group is large. As the lore community has grown, I don't think a lot is known about the Marikati selectives and how important they are. what they did, and how it shows how meta the universe of Tess is, because I've been shot down so many times for my super meta lore, but I think if we touch upon the Maricade selectives, I think it would be have a whole thing dedicated to it. I think it would be great.
The problem is, I think that's a whole cast unto itself that
Mm-hmm.
I personally would need to get a little bit of prep work done for before we tried to tackle it, because there's a lot going on that is very deeply hidden within kind of some of Michael Kirkbride's out of game texts.
Yeah.
And most of it was written during his Knights of the Nine consulting work on Oblivion. So I think we will go ahead and set that one aside. Probably.
Yeah, I totally concur, because it's just such a deep topic.
So in lieu of, are we gonna tackle Skyrim today, or do we want to do something else and just kind of hash out more and more meta? Because why not? There's never too much of that.
What did we want to hash out about Skyrim exactly? Because we could easily go into that.
Well, like I was starting to talk about, I think the first and foremost kind of thing that we need to get done with that is talk about the main point of the games following the fall of the towers.
Mm-hmm.
Because none of it really clicks on the bigger level without looking at it through that lens. None of the really cool lore comes in until we start talking about that. And the first thing that really comes to mind is the Nordic people and their relation with Snowthroat.
Mm-hmm.
And I love to hash on it over and over and over again endlessly. The reason that Skyrim is the focus of a game is Snowthroat Tower has collapsed because its stone, the cave, was deactivated.
What's the cave?
The large consensus in the community that the stone of Snowthroat is a in-universe equivalent of Plato's cave.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and Evan, for those who aren't familiar, well, you can look up Plato's cave, but those who are not familiar with, when we're saying the cave, what do we mean? Obviously, I know that we're talking about Shore Son of Shore, but
yeah,
other people.
That's what I was just about to get to.
Okay, sorry. So
the be all end all of the analogy here is the Nordic people have forgotten the old ways. They have scrapped their totemic religion and instead taken up the imperial pantheon.
Yeah.
So that is the absolute fall of tower.
Just a second here. When you link it with the cave, and then you said that they took on the imperial mantle, just like that, it kind of throws off people. Maybe you should talk about how they went from a what do you call it? A metaphysical, poetic sort of a culture into a literal culture, and shun the old gods and all that.
So talk about the what they used to be versus what they are now.
Exactly, and why that is the stone and how it shattered. That would explain it. I mean,
Um, you know, the best that I can do is kind of throw out examples of how the Nords have changed from game to game. Um, I believe it was Morrowind, and this example was actually brought up on the main page earlier. You know, it is taboo in Nordic culture to kill a wolf because it might be. I think the god was Seti.
yeah,
But you know, back in Morrowind, there was this very strong cultural thing with the Nords where you don't kill a wolf because it is incredibly taboo because it's like killing one of your old gods. And you know, we see in Morrowind there's that huge like, okay, don't fuck with our old totem. Whereas in Skyrim, we don't even see the totem hardly mentioned except by that one hunter
one
down in
lone
Moria.
hunter in the mountains by himself and his grandson.
Yeah. So I mean, this is one way that the Nords have forgotten the old ways. That they've forgotten that they're fucking world-eating dragons who don't give a shit about reality.
And we should probably explain that the Nords are not Nords and Needs. The Nords did not come from Tamriel. They came from Atmora, which is this easy continent further up north, which literally froze itself, including time. And so they
you
had
mean
to take those.
Tamriel? You mean Tamriel and the frozen Kalpa, right?
Um,
We'll get
mm,
into that.
perhaps
Michael
not
knows
just
what I'm
Atmora.
talking about there, but
So what was that, Jasper?
Maybe not just Atmora, because you know the whole Snowthroat being a time space shuttle powered by Keen and all that.
So this is another example of us having to talk about Kalpa's dreams and how they interconnect. So the Nords are, as a race, trans-Kalpic. So what we mean by that is they were in a cycle of their own. They had a reality that was different and separate from Tamriel. So they came from Atmora, and Atmora is a different universe trapped in space time that the Dreamer can only really acknowledge through existence of the Nords. And this is why, you know, a lot of creation myths kind of go over heads. This is like an example of interdimensional travel. In all of the dimensions are connected, right? The two dimensions that we're talking about aren't connected. So how do we ratify? Bueller.
I dropped my. I don't know if
Yes, there
everything's
was.
cool here.
Yeah, sorry, Jeremy had some noise. Well, you were saying that they're from two different. What was it? I forget what the term was you used, Evan.
We'll just go with worlds of creation.
Okay,
you know,
two
the
different.
Nords are the Nords are alien.
Right.
Tamriel.
Yeah.
And they are trans-Kalpic, which means that Atmora and Tamriel are either different Kalpas within the same cycle that the Nords transplanted themselves into. And, you know, we talked about this last week with the Red Guards. You know, they walked by the far shores to sail to Tamriel. So same kind of diff there. The Nords came to Mora, which is a different place in reality.
Oh yeah. and exactly with that, me, I used to be a little bit of part of the Elsewhere mod along with Michael and Todd, and Beyond Skyrim at Mora, and I said, I'll just write the mod for myself. You take a ship from Skyrim to Atmora, and once you get done with the text and your screen goes back black like you're traveling, your computer blue screen. That's the
Sounds good.
mod.
That
means,
works.
yeah, pretty much, because there is no frame of reference that we can use anymore to really at Mora because of what the struggle did to it.
So the point that I was trying to make is that the Nords are weird, and that they came from this place where time froze, etc. And the lore is a little confused. You could argue that they originally were dragons, or that they were originally giants,
or
and that
they were ordinary people but became dragons through
right. And so there's this, and so that's where you get like kind of the whole dragon cult, and there's this, they have this relationship with the giants in Skyrim, which I want so much more lore on that. And so there's definitely kind of this,
please.
There's not enough.
There's definitely this kind of like, these are not just like, Vikings. Like there's some really different stuff going on here. And so when we talk about the totemic religion of the ancient Nords, that's not just like something they did because they were, I don't know, barbarians or something. It reflected ontologically who they were as a people. And when they abandoned the totemic religion, they mythopoetically changed themselves. So that whereas they had been these kind of like time-eating, dragon traveling space pirates or something, not Han Solo, I'm thinking something else, but
when I think of Nerds as space pirates, not to interrupt you, Michael, I think of Klingon.
Yeah, but now they're like just Vikings, and they've kind of really, they're not who they were, and that means then that their tower isn't what it was.
Yes, but also if you look at the creation myths, you don't hear talk about the dragon wars. You don't hear about the dragon, as if the Skyrim, what happened in the Skyrim myths just happened to the people of Skyrim.
Well, I'm gonna jump in here for a second. Has everyone read that article that's on Tomorrowland that discusses the Kalpas and the Godhead and how they all kind of compare to each other? You guys know what I'm talking about? Like the Godhead.
I have not seen that
many aspects or something like that. So it discusses the, how a person can travel between Kalpas, and specifically, it's talking about, Kalpa probably isn't the right word because it's actually talking about dreams. So travel between Yokuda and Tamriel and Akavir. And that when you know enough of the similarities between where you are and the dream you're trying to get to, that you can transpose yourself into both dreams and travel that way. So I imagine the same sort of concept can be used to
territory here.
Well, it's so what the author explains is that by traveling between these dreams, you change yourself because the memory of you between these two amaranths, or between these two dreams, may be different. So let's say you're going to Akavir, Jubal doesn't have the same memory of you that Aldanu does. And so you are changed in that way. And so what I'm suggesting is that the same concept can be applied between Kalpas. So if if the Nords were Nords in their home Kalpa, by virtue of traveling through different kalpa, they changed inherently and became dragons, which is how
could
they're.
agree. I could get behind that. I could agree with that, but I view the Nords that are described in Shore Son of Shore as something different. They are like a fail-safe mechanism. They are the devourer of words. They are Alduin.
I like that.
So
Yeah.
Oh, hello, you.
Let
the
me see
way
if I
that
can find
I
that.
would bundle that one up is that Alduin is just an ideation of what a dragon is. You know, we have this little scrap where the dragons are they're all shards of Akka, right? They're all scales on a dragon's back. And the only reason that we see them as dragons is because that is how time is perceived.
Okay.
So, you know, Nords aren't necessarily Alduin, but they are definitely a failsafe. Alduin is specifically the name that they give their dragon.
Yes,
So
but
Alduin,
can't you see that it is? Can't you see that it is a little bit weird that when the Nords change, Alduin comes back?
well, yeah, you'd be pretty pissed off if your memory was replaced too, wouldn't you?
Exactly.
Actually,
Like.
go ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead, Jazzer. Go ahead.
No, it's all right. It's all right. I gotta hear you first.
Well, I think you hit on something really interesting there. It's the idea of when there's a change, Alduin returns, and how do I want to put this succinctly? That it's almost you could then posit that Alduin is the core or fundamental nature of the Nords, and serves
Which makes
as
him the stone.
like a almost like I mean that's almost that's a little I don't know if that's quite right or not, but
Hey, I like to take things a little bit too far. I know.
oh no, that's fine. I'm totally down. Maybe that Alduin is the protonymic of the Nords. He is the core
Exactly.
identity. That when they shift and change, the protonymic tries to reassert itself for whatever reason, or to remind them, maybe to remind them so that there's continuity of being.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's several different ways you could go with that.
No, I really dig that.
There's also, well, I'm going to get a little bit too heretical in thought here, but the shield.
Say again, Jasper.
Could any of you explain to me the legions of the hinterlands of Chill?
Oh boy.
I'm sorry, you broke up for me there too that time as well.
Yeah, I'm not hearing a lot of what you're trying to say there. If you type it out.
While he's typing, I'd like to reference back to our first lore chat that we had a couple weeks ago, where Evan and I kind of played with the idea that Alduin could be the LDB of the previous Kalpa who failed.
Mm,
I saw your link in chat, Andrew. I just didn't click on it. What I guess the only thing I don't want. I don't know because I also float around the idea that Talos and Akatosh are the same dragon, but and that just goes back to Todd's weird headcanon that I've accepted as my headcanon, but you go ahead, Andrew. Sorry, I just wanted to talk about that with that.
I mean, because my thought was that let's think about Alduin's wall. and how like what is that the last of those prophecies? Let me bring it up. As it says, because the last line is what's important, and that's kind of what I look at. The world eater wakes, and the wheel turns upon the last dragonborn. That's not subject, object, object. That's subject, object, subject. So the last dragonborn and the world eater are the same thing. If you choose to read it.
I feel like that too.
And I mean, yeah, I get a lot of flack for, well, how could it be LDB if you are LDB, and it's okay. Well, it's the last dragonborn of the previous Kalpa, is the current Alduin, and oh well, how can that happen if LDB's whole purpose was to stop Alduin? Well, because he failed. In his failure, and his Kalpa was eaten, he's forced to flee. He becomes the new Alduin because his mimic had changed. Like we had talked about, that that proto-mimic of the Nords has reasserted itself. He is, I mean, assuming that the LDB is Nord, because that's not necessarily a given. But I think go ahead.
Go ahead.
I mean, I think we could agree that regardless of the last Dragonborn's race, his fate is closely tied to the fate of the Nords, specifically because of Alduin returning and the dragons showing up, and that in and of itself is that's Nords fighting Nords. That's the sons of Skyrim fighting amongst themselves, literally. Nords versus dragons, and you as the last Dragonborn have the blood of a dragon, right? Or the soul. I still am unclear on the clear difference. But because you are so ingrained in that dichotomy, Nord versus Nord that is dragon, you are in essence a Nord for all intents and purposes, because the dream, the Godhead has placed you in that role. And so
yes, but you don't have to literally be a Nord, because any race you
and Last Dragonborn does not have to be a Nord, and you can work whatever headcanon you want around it. Honestly, I play as the same Dark Elf player character I played in Morrowind. Returned from his expedition from Akavir after Tasha Ka warned him of the dragon threat, and he's there to stop Alduin. I mean, and that goes back to the unreliable narrator. Test lore, especially when it comes to your individual player character, can be whatever you want it to be.
The way that I always like to look at that is, it's one more case of wearing your skin as an ideology, or vice versa, wearing your ideology in.
So, for if that's not a term that's or a phrase that's familiar, there's a quote. I want to say it was MK, but I could be wrong. That during the LFA wars, the various groups wore their ideology as skin. And if you can corner Todd Damrath and ask him about this, he has really dank lore, especially vis-a-vis the Sayesi. It's some pretty great stuff. But I feel like, as always, we got off track. I'm trying to remember what we were talking about. We were talking about the Nords. Yeah.
I mean, we were given
too much knowledge.
But we just went really deep into the track than maybe we should have.
Well, we were discussing Skyrim lore, and naturally we talked about Nords and the dragons, and how those relate. So I say we're still on topic. We're just in a very, very fine, subgradient of that topic.
Gotcha.
right?
Oh, okay. Sorry about earlier.
No problem. What do you got for us?
No, guys. You're asking really good questions, man. You're really asking good questions. So,
Yeah, but I broke off earlier, and I don't know what the problem was.
oh, it's okay. It happens.
Did we touch on the legions of the hinterlands of?
Now, where are you getting
Or did I
that
miss
term?
one?
Where are you getting that phrase from?
From the Mythic Dawn commentaries?
Oh boy, Evan,
The
this one's
legion,
you, bro.
yeah,
Yeah, really.
the legions that descended on League.
Oh, you're gonna have to give me a second here so I can see the fucking. About. Do you remember which commentary it's out of?
I think the last one, the fifth, seventh. I don't know. Anyways,
Oh, don't make me use the wiki. Fine.
So while he's looking that up, I found I found a group of people who really don't like UESP, which seems insane to me. That's the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages, and they felt that it was extremely inaccurate, and they preferred the Wikia. And I'm like, oh wait, what?
How do you even get so far off of what is real? What is it like to live in their world where reds are blues and ups or downs? How does that happen?
I'm not sure. But they were also like, we don't like the Imperial Library, and I'm like, what do you mean you don't like the Imperial? Oh, it's all about Coda. I'm like, oh, I see now. I understand.
It's just a hate boner
Okay.
for OG texts. I see.
That would be it.
It's not even that. Like an Imperial Library is just straight in-game sources. That is the 90% of their.
Well, it's got a bit of OG. That's why.
And it's just like that's just fucking ignorant.
It's ignorant, dog.
It's just the Elder Scrolls community is such a weird but wonderful group, and we just struggle to get along. Oh well. There needs to be more Khajiit love. That's all it is.
We failed to get we especially failed to get along over like fake made up fantasy sci-fi shit. That's the funny part is we all get mad about stuff that it's stories. Okay, it's like getting mad about Hamlet.
Yeah.
Hey man, people got fucking crazy about Hamlet back in the day. Don't write that one off.
Yeah, that's true.
I believe there was it Hamlet or Macbeth over which they stole an entire theater.
I want to say that's Macbeth, but I could be wrong.
I don't know. I mean, because Hamlet had a lot of really politically charged kind of.
I think it was Hamlet. I think it was Hamlet that they weren't allowed to show, so they said, okay, fine. So they stole brick by fucking brick an entire theater.
Yeah, something
That's
was
awesome.
rotten in Denmark.
I now know what we have to do to get Bethesda to start working on Elder Scrolls 6. We must steal Bethesda Game Studios one brick at a time.
Michael's over here like, I'm going to steal the Declaration of Independence. And we're all right.
Honestly, and I know I posted this as something I don't want us to discuss because I think it's stupid anyway. But I'm honestly happy Bethesda is taking the Fuel 6. I want to see it on a new generation of hardware anyway. I think I know what it would be. It would just be like prototype on this generation of hardware.
Yeah,
I don't actually mind. I just like to joke about it.
Yeah.
back to the hinterlands of chill. I think this is strictly the flavor text by which I am meant to world build Lig. So the direct line is out of the Mythic Dawn commentaries, and you were right, it is the fourth. Suns were riven as your red legions moved from Lig to the hinterlands of Chill. A legion for each get, and Curie was thrown down, and Jaff was thrown down, and Hamagile was crushed with cold salt, and forevermore called Whore. And so it shall be again under the time of Gates.
Ooh.
So this is all Mankarian misinterpretation of reality. What we can take some of it at face value, like these names here, Curry, Jaff, and Hormagile, which is now Hor.
The cities, those are the cities.
Yes, those are cities, or regions, if not cities. But because Lig is Lig, regions are cities. So, the hinterlands of Chill are. This is actually kind of a proto echo of the Admorans coming down into Tamriel and just kicking the ever loving out of everything that was there.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was getting at. Now it's you.
No, I would definitely say that's how we ratify this. The problem is that Mankar looks at these shifts as Kalpic when they are not.
How so?
They're dreams. Lig is its own separate dream, and it is not a previous iteration of Tamriel.
Yes, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is...
It's a coffee spot on there. Lig is... It's in... Yeah. If Franzen was here, of course, you'd have a really great explanation of it.
I mean, I talk for Franzen on most of those matters. He and I did most of the of Lig for LFDZ.
And that's why I'm bringing this up to you.
Yeah, so what we're seeing there is, like I said, just a proto-echo of Mankar Cameron's misinterpretations of reality. Because, like Franzen said, the dude was absolute fucking batshit. Like, he had a clue, but he was so lost in his own mind that he didn't have a clue.
Yes, but still, the concept that we were discussing before me breaking off is the Nords actually being a failsafe mechanism that is supposed to reset Tamriel.
Oh, so you're talking Nords and Lig?
Yes.
Yeah, I can get behind
that.
Not
Nords, but what they were supposed to be before they became the wankers they are right now.
Yep. Just a different iteration that probably had 4 arms and horns and...
Exactly. The Lig version of it.
Yep. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And in the ARG that we used to fucking troll around in, you know, I touched on that topic when I was developing the races of Lig. How, you know, race X is basically the Nords, and you know that holds true because of the personality of it. Which I guess we can have a little bit of fun with in talking about needs, and I will leave this one to you, but Michael, I'm going to say that the needs, the proto-Cyrods are the only race that is actually native to Tamriel.
I technically think the same.
Maybe.
And the caveat there would be, what do you think of the Khajiit in that perspective?
Yeah.
You know, are they, you know, extra dimensional in that way, or are they also, you know, kind of the true inheritors based on their Elnafaic background?
Yeah, this gets really tricky.
Yeah. Michael, do you want to do our super type 2 civilization thing?
Yeah, before we get into that, so I love to joke around that the Khajiit are actually ancient manonauts, ancient astronauts who came from the moons. I don't really mean that. I think it's fun, and it's fun to play with, but Jeremy and I have a crazy conspiracy theory, which I'll let him talk about here in just a second. It gets tricky because we know this much about the Khajiit, that they were Elnofey, and they were Elnofey who could not hold their shape. And so, according to Khajiit, in the words of Clan Mother Anisi, they were altered by Azura and bound to the lunar lattice, that is the cycles of the two moons, so that their physical forms would vary depending on when they're born and the shapes of the moons, or the phases of the moons, I should say. So they were Elnofey like everybody else, but they were altered. And then there was this whole thing that Ifre then also altered a set of Elnofey, and that's the Bosmer. But did it in such a way that they have a static form. So there's like no, the Bosmer are always wood elves. They're not like tigers and tiger men and stuff like that, or house cats, something to that effect. So from that perspective, then they were Elnofey like anybody else, and so they may have been on Tamriel, the continent of Tamriel. Certainly, the Needs are the only human race from Tamriel. That we can definitely say. And then the Needs kind of became humans. But anyway, Jeremy, we have a crazy conspiracy theory.
Oh yeah, and I didn't want to touch on that yet. I was just going to ask about how you say Needs are the only native species of Tamriel. And I can't pronounce her name right now, but those native men from Argonia.
Oh, that's okay. So one of the theories about the Argonians is that they were originally tree lizards, and that the Hist, who are the sentient sapient trees, who are invaders from another dream, a different amaranthine arena, if you will, invade Tamriel, and they mythopoetically alter the Argonians, or they mythopoetically alter these tree lizards, who become then humanoid-ish creatures that we call Argonians. So the Argonians in their protonymic as tree lizards could be original to Tamriel.
Mm-hmm.
Neonymic, which is these humanoid lizard people, that's a new thing.
Yeah, I was talking more about those tribes of actual men from Argonia. It begins with an A.
Oh, that's true.
And I was just wondering, how native are they? That's what I was getting at. And I believe the name begins with an A.
That is not my area.
Oh, I know. Or
I know what you're talking about.
K. It begins with a K. Yeah. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I don't know. I know what you're talking about, but that's not my area of expertise, sadly.
Me neither. We need Gabe in here.
Let me take a look real quick. Human tribes of Argonia.
Like the Korthogi or Kathorgi.
Oh, you mean the Kothringi?
Yeah.
Is that right? No. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh God, it's been a while since I looked at that shit.
Yeah, there's not much known about those guys.
Let me see. I think this is just a tribal name, stemming from the various dispersions of Needs.
Okay. Yeah.
I think that's what I settled on.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see what I think when I read this. They also might be elves, if I remember.
There are Kothringi in ESO, and they're human, but they have like kind of purplish skin.
Yeah, I
it's
was
supposed to
going
be
to say
silver.
another skin is not normal colored.
One thing to take note of is the way I view needs is they are kind of these hippies that are in tune with their environment. The way that you see them in Cyrodiil, there's two tribes of them. One is a tribe of warriors, the Highlanders, and then there's a tribe of shamans and sorcerers and all that. Same with what we get in lore of the needs in High Rock, the ones that were changed by the Direni into today's Bretons, or current Calva era Britons. So it wouldn't surprise me that the purple skin wouldn't surprise me if they were native to the influence of the Hist and all that.
But honestly, not going back to the Kathrigi, but what Michael was speaking about the Khajiit, because like I want to go in a little bit of my space lore after he finishes his thought about the Khajiit and my thoughts about the Khajiit as well.
Okay.
No, I'm good, man. You go ahead.
Okay, well, and, me and Michael, we lore a lot, and we have this little conspiracy theory that that the Khajiit are actually running an ancestor simulation on a Matryoshka brain, which is running the Arbus, and they're trying. And actually, Michael, I have a new idea with this that relates to the other races as well. Is maybe these are other races of aliens because they're so different from each other that they're trying to test how they would work with each other on a continental scale before they introduce them to a galactic community.
Actually, you could argue that based on the whole 12 worlds of creation thing.
Yeah, right there too. I don't know. I mean, and I'm actually going off of your writings, Michael. I know it's not official in-game lore, and I know this is what this whole conversation is about. And you know how I take Codas as pretty much legit if I like it. And and that's going off of a lot of your Khajiit creation, the Khajiit Tower mainly, your writing, which if any of you have not read yet, read Michael's Khajiit Tower. Because it will answer.
It's in desperate need of a rewrite, which hopefully I'll do sometime soon.
Regardless, everyone who hasn't read it, read it rather. It's really good stuff. And also Evan's piece. It's somewhere on Test Reddit about the Dreamer actually being in a coma. Real being in a coma.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I've always thought that the Dreamer is a being in coma, but I actually like the simulation idea.
Did I talk about the Dreamer being in coma? That's new.
You tagged you actually a while back. You posted something. It was an article about God, I wish I could find it again. And I know it was you. And from what I interpreted from it is that the Amaranth is in a dreamer, dated by a lover. Like just back to the whole creation myth theory. I wish I could find it, and I know maybe if I go back into Tesla or my messages, I think I might be able to find it. But it was actually really good stuff. It was definitely you who wrote it, though, Evan.
Is it by Potatosaurus Rex on Test Reddit?
I don't remember who wrote it on Test Reddit. I just remember you sending me a link and saying it's something that you wrote up a while ago.
I mean, I think the closest I've come to toying with the Dreamer being coma patient in a hospital was when I did the oh god, it was
It was an LDZ.
Yeah, it was the Palavar at Red Mountain.
Yep, that's it.
I left it fairly ambiguous as to the state of the patient, whether it was a dying old man. I'll have to pull that up. I think the ending that I ended up having Michael publish was, you know, a new iteration of the Nereverin talking with a Dwemer ghost on like the precipice of Red Mountain.
Yes.
And the Dwemer ghost like pushes this character in. And actually, I think it was a Vivicine, like a reincarnate of Vivek. Yeah, it was supposed to be a myth echo of Vivek. Anyways, this character gets pushed in, is like falling forever through an endless haze of amaranths. And one of the scenes that they are able to kind of view from the outside, like an actual look at the amaranth as they dream, is this person in a cold, austere room with high-tech looking gadgets all around them that are beeping.
Yes. This is the text I read. Yeah.
I think my intention there was actually somebody dying in a hospital. I can get behind, comatose amaranthine. It works, with the cycles of decay that lead to amaranth. Because, amaranth is be all end all, just the decay of reality. God, yeah, it's been a few years now.
Yeah. It just, whatever you sent me, it was a good read. And that's just how I interpreted it. And actually, it was very similar to an idea me and Michael threw around in our hangouts about the Amaranth being a failed suicide attempt in a kind of a comatose state.
So it's funny that text you're referencing was actually just a shout back to Nerevar at Red Mountain.
Okay, yeah. I'll have to read it again. I mean, I interpret things through a much different lens when I read them. I'm more, you're a meta guy too, so you can understand that.
Yeah, I always go with how can I make this into one big literary cycle is generally my process when I'm writing this shit.
Yeah, I wish I could sit down and write something. I know Michael here always encourages me to write something. I just don't. I'm not that great of a writer. So I tend to get my ideas out and hangouts like this with people because I feel like that's my thoughts are a lot more organized than if I try to write something.
Oh God! Sorry, Horizon Zero Dawn got me on the edge of my seat, boys.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
I almost did a big bad oopsie.
No, it's okay, dude. I spend so many hangouts with Todd playing Dark Souls. I'm so used to that shit. So don't even worry about that.
I've had that game for about 2 months now. Didn't get the time to get into it.
Dark Souls. It's pretty glorious.
Yeah,
not Dark Souls. It's Horizon Dawn.
Horizon Zero Dawn. Now I'm PC only gamer, so that's something unfortunately I won't get to experience. Even though it's one of those games I would like to experience, but what can you do? Buy PlayStation 4, and I know Michael wants me to get on ESO with him on there too. So maybe one of these days, maybe.
I think the fucking coolest thing I've done thus far with my PS4 is find a tidbit in Assassin's Creed Origins about scorpions, and I'm trying to figure out how I want to link that to Elder Scrolls lore, but I tagged Michael in that post on the Dirt Book Machine.
Yeah. Yeah, I still need to get Origins. I spent my game money this month though on Battlefront 2, and I'm not regretting it so far. It's a pretty good game. I'm liking it.
So there's something you know about us now, everybody. Lorebeards play other games than Elder Scrolls.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, we got someone back. I believe that's Joshiba's. I love your bookshop, by the way.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can hear someone. Yeah, yeah.
All right. Thank you. Good. My internet was acting up. I just had to reset my phone. Tried to join a couple minutes ago.
It's fine. My mic's been doing the same shit.
Josh's Rare Books. Is that Skylar?
Yes, it is.
Hello.
Yeah. I love.
Are we still live?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
I was watching on YouTube a couple
we
minutes
got
ago.
a little diverge from the topic at hand, as it were, but we're good.
The LBD being Alduin from or the previous Kalpa, or I got that reversed. Sorry, Alduin
we did
LBD from the previous Kalpa.
Yep.
Isn't Mirak the LBD from the previous Kalpa?
Yes, but you know we have a whole lot of that goes falling in against each other, so it's possible to be seeing both. Mirak is a dragonborn that denied reality in a different way. So the way that I like to kind of talk about that one is, Mirak, his goof was kind of covered by Hermaeus Mora. Alduin, the dragonborn that became him, didn't get that little failsafe there. He just got fucking screwed and reverted to a protonymic state.
All right.
You have to touch on the duality of the Nord people for that to make sense.
Yes. I'm sorry.
I don't think I know how to respond to that, and I was waiting for you or Michael to say something.
The duality of the Atmorans,
Well, I mean,
Izmir, Ismanitas, the whole dual name thing, the dual protonymic.
well, I have my own ideas about the Nords and Atmorans actually being one and the same. That Atmora is future Tamriel, not future. They're leaving a death call.
See, I would say that Atmora is not Tamriel. It's a different fight. It's a different dream. We don't necessarily have the same metaphysical realities going on in that situation. Because the dreamer of Atmora is not necessarily the same one that's cranking up weird shit in Tamriel.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that is a good point. And honestly, no, I'm gonna go right to this. Nord history, Nord lore is not my strong suit anyway. It's just these are my ideas I float around with people. So, you know.
Did you want to kind of direct conversation a little bit further on that point, Skylar? Or we did touch on that like, before you joined in.
Yeah. I don't have too much more to add, but I probably could like come up with some BS to talk about. So about how Mirak was the last Dragonborn of the previous Kalpa, and you said that you could not be and also be. What exactly did you mean by that?
So the thing that we're looking at primarily with all that lore is you know, is it a dream or a kalpa that Mirak came out of? And the other thing that we have to reconcile within that is you know, who did the last Dragonborn ultimately become? And the question between Alduin versus Mirak is Hermaeus Mora. I'm not sure what you're trying to get at though with the direct me. I'm floundering.
Was mainly just something I want to add in because a couple minutes ago we were talking about how Alduin, or the last Dragonborn, gets his mimic replaced by Alduin, and Alduin then in the next Kalpa. And so I was just trying to touch base on how that didn't happen with Mirak. And that's all I was trying
Oh, right. Okay. So, right. Got it. I know where the fuck I'm going now. Okay. So, the Dragonborn is basically like a role in a play that it has something that it's supposed to do in order for it to truly be Dragonborn. Or more specifically, the last Dragonborn, right? So the difference between Mirak and our hypothetical last Dragonborn that became Alduin is Hermaeus Mora. So you have to look at what Mirak was trying to do. You know, he enslaved dragons and bent them to his will, right? And Dragon Cult really didn't like that shit. I mean, really didn't like that shit. So shit kind of came down on his head eventually. But Hermaeus Mora ended up kind of pulling him out of that fire and into Apocrypha.
So because he went into Apocrypha, he wasn't allowed to have his mimic replaced for the next Kalpa or dream.
Right. And I mean, the thing is, you know, he didn't fail in the same sense that a Dragonborn would usually fail.
Yeah, because he says, I chose a different path.
Yeah.
And you meet him in Apocrypha.
And that's exactly it. So basically we have the hypothetical Dragonborn that became Alduin. He got eaten, essentially. And so his body returned to the places that it came from, namely the Dream Sleeve, and got recycled in such a way that the Aldenu, the dreamer of Tamriel, was able to view him in all of this shit that is in front of his eyes that aren't quite there. Mirak, on the other hand, got pulled into, you know, and this is kind of a study on the nature of Daedric realms. You know, how far can we trust them? How far do they go? But be all end all, Apocrypha saved him from, you know, the same fate of end because he was still alive.
That makes a lot of sense.
No, and, and, and it does because I never played the Solstheim DLC for Skyrim, but think about like what Evan said. It makes sense that why there's two Dragonborns there when there should only be one, or not one, but only one known.
All right, it's getting around midnight over here, and I've got an early morning shift to do, so I'm gonna call it a night here. Hopefully, we can do this again.
Oh, well, I'm always down for a hangout. I know Michael is, and Evan seems like he's really into hangouts too. So, we like to do these things a lot.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
All right, thanks guys for coming, and thanks for hearing out my heresies.
See you later.
It's none of it's heresies. It's all
Cool.
love in the Elder Scrolls universe.
Cool. See you later.
Take it
Have a good
easy.
one, man.
Yeah.
So actually, Michael, I actually want to ask you a question, and I don't know if this is the format for it because it's public. But I'm sure there's might be a lot of modding fans. How's the progress going on Beyond Skyrim elsewhere?
I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
Oh,
No, I'm kidding.
I know you're not going to kill me, Michael. I know as soon as you see me in real life, you're probably going to give me the biggest bear hug in the world. So.
Oh, for certus, I am definitely. I would say it's going really well. I can't go into a whole lot of specifics because we have like PR people that do stuff like that. But we are doing a lot of writing. There's been a lot of development of the individual areas. I'll never admit to saying it, but there might be a trailer coming out soon. But I would say it's going well. The problem that most mods run into is not having programmers, specifically implementers and modelers. And I will tell you that we have implementers and modelers. So I would say that it's going very well, and the team is very excited. I'm very excited. It's good times, man. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
So you hear that, everyone who might be watching this? We might actually get a really good representation of the province we've always wanted to see in a game.
Oh, it's going to be glorious. Some of I sometimes will leak concept art. I really shouldn't. I never said that, but sometimes I leak concept art, and the concept art is fantastic. We're reaching that point where I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about this, but people are starting to build the game world itself.
Ooh, that's a big step. That's a big step.
Including like architecture and man, it's awesome.
Yeah.
We still have a long way to go. There's no release date that I'm aware of. There's still a good bit to do, but man, it's going to be good stuff.
Yeah, it sounds like you're on a faster track than Tamriel Rebuilt, which I, for one, have been waiting for since about 2003.
I don't really know anything about them, so I can't make any comparisons.
Oh, it's just originally they undertook they bit off a bit more than they did. They were going to do actually all Tamriel, hence the moniker Tamriel Rebuilt. But they just settled on finishing Morrowind as a whole province, and they're doing quite well.
Nice.
But it's still slow in the making. But any large mod is like that, and people who are clamoring for because I know a lot of people are clamoring for Beyond Skyrim because it's such a huge mod that I think it's good for people who are hearing this know that it's coming, but don't hold your breath for it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I will say this: one of the fun parts of the whole thing with working on Beyond Skyrim Elsewhere. So let's, true fact, I am really crazy about Khajiit more than a little. Like I probably need therapy. Um, and pretty much everybody that's working on this mod is just as crazy as I am, if not more. And
possible.
I have conversations with our creative director Bard about Khajiit theology and Khajiit lore that are just crazy. Hang on a second.
Is that Adam Fields you're talking about?
Yeah, that's him.
Yeah.
That dude can he slings it with the best of them. It's fucking amazing.
That guy is just wow.
Yeah.
It's one of those situations where you're like, I am talking to somebody who is way smarter than me. You know?
Yeah, we had him on last week, and he was text only, but the shit he was throwing out there was like, okay, I'm going to struggle to grasp this, and you're going to correct me where I fuck up via text. And there was a lot of corrections going on.
There was you got those of you who are in certain of the Facebook groups may have seen that he releases these graphical charts that deal with the gods and their relationships and stuff like this. And he and I had a long conversation the other night where he broke down some of it for me, and that stuff is mind-boggling. Because it's talking all about this stuff that we were talking about today about Nimics and stuff like that, pre and post convention. And it's just like, wow, really good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the guy who's in charge of the whole project. So reasons to be encouraged.
Yeah. Yeah. And I myself, being previously involved in the project, I've been privy to some of the stuff that's been going on, concept art. It's going to be fantastic. It's the Elsewhere we've all been waiting for.
I honestly cannot wait for it. As soon as I heard about it, I got like all excited. I was searching the website for a release date.
I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't excited until Michael got onto the project. I have a very low esteem for most minds in the community that do mods, to be honest, because there's so much trash.
Oh God, yes.
And this team, they get it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't had a whole lot of interaction with Beyond Skyrim outside of Elsewhere, but from the little bit that I have, we got some good people working out there. And I can say this, like on the Elsewhere mod, we have our team is over 100 people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. And you have great writers. I mean, cough, cough, Todd DeBarra, cough, 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 you know. And I wish I had the time to put that Torval stuff together for you.
Well, I mean, I remember our conversations, and I'm going to find a way to try and work that in there.
And I'll give you more.
Good stuff.
And of course I'll give you more. Know, you know me, I just can't sit down and write.
I was visited by an Elfique. I apologize.
It happens. There's nothing wrong with that.
It's all gravy.
Beans for me though. Thank you. Well, shit. Do we want to keep going, or have we covered everything that we want to for today?
I think we've been at it now for a little over 2 hours, maybe almost, probably heading towards 3. I actually do have to get going, as much as I would love to hang out and talk more.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I have some errands to run, so but
Right.
this has been a really great chat.
See you guys maybe possibly next week.
Definitely,
I
we'll
am
make it happen.
always down for one of these, so yeah, just we'll get it together. Maybe we will tackle the Mercati selectives uh, next week. Maybe a little bit more organized the chat, but
To figure out what we want to talk about.
yeah,
I feel like we left so much of Skyrim untouched, like we do every week. But
I know it's hard to keep track on Skyrim sometimes, admittedly.
Well, it raises a lot of the crazier, deeper lore subjects that we kind of have to talk about.
Yeah.
yeah, it'll be good though, especially because going forward, we can kind of just stem from okay, we've already talked about this, so we don't have to go over it again. That'll be helpful.
Oh yes, of course. All right, guys, it's been a complete pleasure.
See you later.
See you later.